Hi everyone, my name is Hannah and I'm a compulsive overeater. Thank you so much for inviting me here today. Um, I've been asked to share on step three, but I thought it was probably helpful for me to give you a bit of background about me, my experience, strength and hope in general, before I talk about both the first time I took step three and how I work step three now. Um, so I came into program in I think it was June, July of 2018. Um, and I was broken, is the short answer of that. I was broken physically and emotionally. But I didn't realize also at the time I was broken spiritually. When I came into OA, I was 180 kilos, which is about 400 pounds, which is about 28 and a bit stone. Um, and I genuinely believed for a very, very long time that I just had a problem with my weight. I didn't see it as a problem of food. And, I was the chubby kid growing up who became the overweight teenager, who became the fat woman in her 20s, who became morbidly obese before coming into OA. My weight just only ever went up. Um, and I just didn't really see it as a food issue. Um, it wasn't until the food became so crazy and so insane that I couldn't lie to myself about it anymore, that I couldn't be in denial about it anymore, that I realized I needed a program. I needed something else. That, oh, this isn't something that Weight Watchers is going to fix. This isn't something that any other diet's going to fix because this isn't a weight problem. There is something mentally not quite right here. Um, I remember kind of eating food to the point where I was just in physical pain. And I mean, I remember a couple of instances whereby it was just so, it was such insanity. I remember eating food that I didn't even like. I remember like ordering a delivery and this food turned up and it was soggy and it was cold and it was disgusting. And I ate all of it. And I ate all of it to the point where I was uncomfortable. I couldn't, there was no lie I could tell myself to rationalize that behavior. There was nothing I could say to excuse what I was doing. It just didn't make sense. I was able to lie when I was like, oh, I'll go into a shop and I'll buy these bag of what have you, and I'll share it with everyone in the office. I'll share it knowing full well as soon as I put it in my basket, I was not sharing that at all. I was going to eat all of them and I was going to eat them at secret at my desk and try and make it look like it was the same one the whole time and that I hadn't eaten five. Like, but I had to, I could tell myself that lie to justify picking it off the shelf. There was no lie to explain why I was eating food I didn't like to a point where I was uncomfortable. And and I remember like stealing food off a stranger's plate in a restaurant even when I had my own food coming, like just crazy stuff. And and it was that insanity. And I think the emotion that really drove me into this program was shame. Like my behaviors around food were shameful. My body felt shameful, and I just didn't know what to do. I'd known about OA ever since I was a teenager, actually because I come from a dynasty of compulsive overeaters, and my mum was in OA for a while. She did not stay in OA, which is a separate matter. Um, but I kind of knew it existed, but I'd never kind of put two and two together that maybe OA was a place for me. Maybe actually I have an eating disorder. Maybe that is it. Um, so it took me a while. I did the classic of looking on the website, where's my local meeting? Okay, it's there, it's in Clapham, and then I'll just carry on and not go to it for another few weeks. And then I check the website again, and oh, yeah, that means still exists and still there, and it took me a while to pluck up the courage. Um, but when I did, I walked into that room and still full of shame, shame feeling like it was in the back of my throat, feeling like I was choking on it. and I could barely open my mouth. And I just sat and I cried the whole meeting, and just big silent tears, and just totally and utterly overwhelmed. Like I didn't understand what was going on. I didn't know what everyone was talking about. They were talking about tools and traditions and steps, and God came up a lot, and it looked a bit like a cult, but there was just something there. And it was just this like, this is where I belong. That was that feeling. It was just, this is where I belong. And actually, that kind of feeling, which I couldn't explain and which I didn't really know, it was months later, actually, during my step three, I was like, oh, that's God. That's God. That feeling that I just can't explain and that I can't put my finger on, and I don't know why I'm feeling it, but I'm feeling it. And it was that feeling of this is where I'm meant to be. Um, so I came to my first meeting, and I kind of did basically everything other than get a sponsor for the first few months, because I knew once getting a sponsor, I was going to actually have to do the work, and that looked scary. So, I got the book. I went to a Region 9 conference. I did a weekend retreat. You name it, I did it other than get a sponsor and work the steps, because I knew the scary thing. Um, so it was a good few months, and quite frankly, in those few months, my food got worse. It got worse because purely because the denial has gone. Because I came into meeting rooms and I heard my story reflected back at me from every single person. It was like, oh, I can't lie to myself anymore. There is zero denial anymore. And I am staring my own illness in the face. And it's an illness that had been with me for 20 plus years. And it's big and it's scary. It's got teeth, it's powerful. And what the hell do I do with it? What on earth do I do with the reality of being in this body with this illness hanging around me? Um, and it was really painful. And when I finally was ready, I'd done everything other than what I really wanted to do was like read a book, do a test, get a qualification, and then graduate and leave this program. That's really what I wanted to do. But when I figured out I couldn't do that, and that I was probably going to have to be a lifer here, I did start working with a sponsor. And by the grace of God, that is the same sponsor I have today, 5 years in. I got abstinent pretty much straight away working with the sponsor, and I have maintained that abstinence ever since. I am pretty much literally half the size I was in terms of my weight loss and my recovery, my physical recovery. Um, and yeah, I live a life that's happy, joyous, and free. Um, and I think working the steps, I think it's hard to talk about step three without also talking about step one and two, because they are absolutely the foundation of step three. It is not, I do not think it is possible to do step three without a really solid step one and two. And I did spend a long time in step one and two, and I don't think that was a bad thing for me. Um, I needed it drummed into me to the very core of my being, to my bones, that I am a compulsive overeater and my life is unmanageable and I cannot do this on my own. Because to this day, every now and again, fleeting little thought will come in of going, maybe you're not. Maybe you're all right. Like maybe like maybe that'll be. And luckily, I've worked such a solid program now that as soon as that thought comes in, the second thought comes in immediately afterwards and goes, "What on earth are you talking about? You really need yet more experience that you're a compulsive overeater. Come on now." And so I needed to have that be so second nature to me, to then be able to go, okay, now that I know I really do have a problem, that denial has to be completely gone, that it's like, okay, now I can surrender. I can surrender and I can let go. And the idea of doing a step three, it kind of felt really odd and a bit unusual. I didn't quite know what that meant. It was like, okay, is that like just like a decision? Like, okay, so, okay, I do that now. Now what? And so I didn't really get it the first time I did step three. Um, my sponsor suggested a location to do my step three. She said, pick
That's
a
10
place
minutes,
where
Hannah.
that's 10 minutes already. Oh
Yeah.
gosh, thank you. Um, she said, find a location that where you feel like you can feel connected to your higher power. And so we went and we met up in person and I did my step three. And I was really expecting a kind of like, ah ha 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 moment, clouds parting, higher power appear. And that did not happen. I was a bit disappointed and I thought I'd done it wrong. And yeah, and then I kind of carried on and I started my step four and it felt really anticlimactic. And then, but actually, what my sponsor said is okay. And now, as part of your morning routine, you do that step three prayer every day. And I have done that every day since. And every morning I wake up and I do a step three prayer. And it was then and it was actually in doing that, it was the maintenance of step three. It was in doing my step three every day. That was that real reminder of, oh, step three is a process. It's not a thing you do and then kind of go on. It is a daily process because I will, left to my own devices, take my own self-will back. I will take it back and I will go, I've got a better idea. I know what I'm doing. I can figure this out by myself. I don't need God. I don't need OA. I'm all fine. And I need every morning to recommit to this program because I work this program one day at a time. I cannot work this program any other way. I would love to like do loads on one day and then like bank it up for a few days and then go out and do whatever I want. It's not how it works. Got to do this one day at a time. And a step three prayer every morning is absolutely how I do that. And when I came into OA, I didn't have a kind of a spiritual um, background. I didn't grow up religious. I didn't grow up with that kind of, God was not something that was spoken about in our house. My dad, I would say, is an atheist, and I would call him an atheist of the Richard Dawkins variety. Like religion and God was a bad thing in my house. Um, so to kind of do a prayer and not really know who I was doing it to, what I was doing it to, was hard and it was difficult. And I kind of felt like a fraud at certain points. Um, but there was that kind of just act as if, just give it a try, just see what happens. And I think, that spiritual principle of this tradition is faith. It was that leap of faith and I feel like in so many other areas of my life, there's that kind of scientific idea of you have a theory and a hypothesis, and then you test it to prove that it's true. Whereas for me, step three in spirituality is about I don't really have a hypothesis. I just leap and hope when I see if I'm proven wrong, rather than proving to be correct. And it's like I give it a try. I just give it a try and see what happens. And 5 years later, I'm still here. Um, and so kind of coming to terms with what God is has been a process of doing those daily step threes and, doing little step threes in the moment during the day where I can feel I'm trying to grab my self will back. And, I spent a long time in step two trying to like define God. And my sponsor very wisely said, well, if you do manage to figure out what God is, let me know because there's a few billion people that also want to know. So if you figured that out, let us know. Um, as soon as yeah, maybe, just maybe, I can't figure that out on my own. Maybe I just have to accept the fact that I don't know. And that, again, is part of that faith of step three. I can't define God. I never have been able to, and I never will. The closest I've got to a definition of God that works for me is it's the belief that everything is exactly as it should be, because if it could be something else, then it would be. If I was supposed to be anywhere other than where I am right now, then that's where I would be. So to just so really my higher power is acceptance. And it's the just to be able to then surrender to the I'm not in control of all of this, to just surrender it all. Um, and then the other big kind of aha moment I came to when it was like, what is my higher power? Was to kind of recognize how I experience God and that God is not a thought, God is a feeling. I don't think God, I feel God. And to really then be abstinent, to put down the food allows me to feel. I couldn't feel when I was in the food. I was all in my head all the time, overthinking.
That's
So I
time.
had to, thank you, Cheryl, acknowledged. So I had to be abstinent and I had to get to that point and I had to be abstinent in step three. For me personally, to be able to feel my higher power's will for me, I couldn't think it. And I'm sorry, I know I'm out of time. I just wanted to quickly end on one thing, and that was I really struggled at first when people talked about God using what I would call human language, the idea that God has a plan, or that God thinks a certain way, or that God has emotions, that kind of making God feel human. And that really didn't work for me. And actually, what I have found is that God, for me, feels like my internal compass, like a compass that always points north. It's not a decision, it's not a conversation. It's just when I like a compass, always pulling me a certain direction. So whenever I want to connect with God, it's that connecting with my body, connecting with my intuition. What am I feeling and where am I feeling pulled to?
And I do
And
need to
so,
call
yeah,
time.
thank you very much. I'll leave it there.